Russia's aggressive policies in Eastern Europe and the Baltics have pushed NATO to take drastic measures. The Baltic Sea, in particular, is at the center of the conflict between Russia and NATO during these difficult times. After the Russian Navy's Baltic Fleet conducted spectacular exercises in recent weeks, the alliance has launched a massive Navy drill operation against the Russian Navy. The U.S. Navy's Sixth Fleet has sent the world's most powerful and largest aircraft carrier to the Baltic Sea, the USS Gerald R. Ford, which recently made its first port visit in Oslo. According to the statement from the Norwegian Joint Headquarters, training is planned with Norwegian forces off the Norwegian coast during the carrier group's stay. Norwegian officials said they are looking forward to joint operations on NATO's northern flank that enhance interoperability, protect freedom of navigation in international waters, deter aggression, and prepare the alliance for defense. Captain Rick Burgess, commander of the U.S. Navy and the USS Gerald R. Ford, stated that the carrier strike group will cruise in the North Sea and Arctic waters. On the other hand, officials of the Royal Norwegian Navy indicated that the USS Ford assault group would not sail north of Tromsø, citing the potential for escalation of tensions with Russia. The USS Gerald R. Ford is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that measures 333 meters long, 76 meters high, and 78 meters wide. It is the first of its kind and has a crew of 4,500 and space for approximately 90 aircraft. The USS Ford has also embarked on its first mission with a group of 3 destroyers, a missile cruiser, and submarines. The group includes more than 6,000 seafarers. So, what was Russia's reaction to the U.S. Navy's entry into the Baltic? The Russian embassy in Norway stated that the USS Gerald Ford's visit to Norway was an unreasonable and damaging show of force. The embassy emphasized that there is no problem in the north that requires a military solution or any issue that requires foreign intervention. The Russian Navy regularly conducts drills in the Northern Fleet, the Barents Sea, and the White Sea. Since the beginning of this month, it has conducted 17 full-scale exercises, 2 of which involve the Navy and Air Force. One of these exercises was recently announced by the Russian Ministry of Defense. The Russian Northern Fleet conducted a complex exercise in the Barents Sea with 15 surface combatants, submarines, support ships, and the Air Force. During this exercise, the squadron demonstrated its combat capabilities, including live-fire exercises with anti-aircraft missiles and artillery for cadets of the Russian General Military Staff Academy and the Belarusian Military Academy. The largest ships involved were the destroyer Admiral Ushakov and the large anti-submarine ship Vice Admiral Kulikov. The Su-24 attack aircraft, Ilyushin Tu-38 maritime patrol and anti-submarine aircraft, and K-27 anti-submarine helicopters also participated in the exercise. The Russian Navy conducted another exercise of similar size in the Barents Sea last week. So, is this battle group an extension of Formidable Shield? The U.S. Sixth Fleet and Strike Veneto led the major air and missile defense exercise Formidable Shield with live fire at sea off Andøya in northern Norway and off the west coast of Scotland. The USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group sailed in the North Sea this weekend, with Navy ships participating in the exercise that has now ended. More specifically, the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group will conduct several exercises with the Norwegian Army, Navy, Air Force, and Special Forces, as reported by the Norwegian Armed Forces. One of these exercises will be the large-scale combat exercise Arctic Challenge exercise, which will take place in Norway, Finland, and Sweden starting at the beginning of the week. The USA is among the participating countries, and the USS Gerald R. Ford has a large number of F-18 Hornets-type fighters on board. The exercises will primarily be conducted in an area off the Helgeland coast in northern Norway. The USS Ford Strike Group's participation in these exercises is a significant opportunity to test both the ship's potential and the attack group's effectiveness. Additionally, it will demonstrate the capabilities of the USS Ford and serve as a deterrent to Russia's increasing activity. So, what does the USS Ford's visit to Norway mean? According to the U.S. Sixth Fleet, the last time a U.S. aircraft carrier visited Norway was 65 years ago, in 1958. However, the visiting aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman participated in the NATO exercise Trident Juncture in 2018. The most noticeable difference between the two visits may be the fact that the USS Truman did not stop at Oslo Port. In any case, the USS Gerald Ford's visit to Norway indicates that aircraft carriers are making a significant return to the European arena. The commander of the Norwegian Naval Forces, Rear Admiral Runar Andersen, stated that the reintroduction of these strategically important and heavy vehicles to the continent for use in the collective defense of Europe is crucial. Andersen also highlighted the continuous operation of such ships from the USA, UK, and France in the European region, especially in the Mediterranean. The high level of NATO activity in the north appears to be leading the Russian Navy to respond with more exercises. The Russian Northern Fleet has launched a command and staff exercise involving 1,800 soldiers, 40 aircraft, and up to 15 ships, as reported by the Russian Defense Ministry. Among the participating ships is the missile cruiser Marshal Ustinov. The exercise focuses on forces management in crisis situations in the Arctic Ocean, with an emphasis on securing Russia's maritime economic activities and sea lanes such as the Northern Sea Route. It also aims to improve interoperability between the Air Force, air defense units, and Navy. The exercise includes cooperation with aircraft performing long-haul flights, which are part of Russia's strategic nuclear forces. These long-range bombers, tankers, and reconnaissance aircraft operate under this command. So, what is Russia aiming to achieve with these exercises? The exercise is reportedly part of the Northern Fleet's annual training cycle and is being conducted over several days. The Russian Defense Ministry announced that the Northern Fleet is also conducting a submarine hunting exercise in the Barents Sea. A search and attack unit from the Kola flotilla, including smaller anti-submarine vessels, has been conducting operations throughout the week to search for, detect, and track a submarine. The unit is supported by minesweepers, 142 maritime patrol aircraft, and 27 helicopters. The Russian Defense Ministry has not disclosed specific information about the number of soldiers, ships, or aircraft participating in the exercise. This training activity follows two exercises conducted by the Northern Fleet Air Force last week. During one of the exercises, Su-33 warplanes conducted exercises to detect and intercept rival aircraft, as well as conduct surface target bombardments at a training ground over the Barents Sea. The second exercise involved Su-24 bombers, reconnaissance aircraft, and MiG-31 fighter jets, and took place at a training ground off the coast of the Kola Peninsula in the White Sea. In this exercise, exercises were conducted to detect and intercept enemy aircraft, as well as carry out bombing and missile attacks. More than 20 targets imitating rival ships and armored vehicles were reportedly hit. However, the Russian Ministry of Defense did not provide specific information about the scale of these exercises, and it appears that the significant losses suffered by the Russian army in the Ukrainian war have not affected the strength of its navy and air force. Nonetheless, the effectiveness of the NATO Navy in the region and the ongoing operations of the Russian Navy in these areas seem to increase the tension between the two rivals. At the center of the activity here are the regions where the Kherson and Dnipro rivers are located. Although Ukraine recaptured the region's capital, the city of Kherson from Russian forces last November in one of the most important victories of the year-long war, the Russians are still trying to control territory in the wider Kherson province. Russian forces used positions on the east bank of the Dnipro River to bombard the city of Kherson on the opposite side of the waterway, preventing Kiev from regaining a sense of normalcy in the city. The Ukrainian armed forces, on the other hand, tried to disperse Russian troops with artillery attacks against Russian positions east of Dnipro. On the other hand, Russia tried to harden its defenses in the region, but these days there was no immediate sign that the bombardment of the city of Kherson was waning. Kherson, Governor Vladimir Saldo, appointed by Russia, said in a statement on Russian television that Moscow forces strengthened the defense line on the east side of the river. During the winter months, parts of the Kherson region spent weeks without access to electricity and water as Russian forces rained missiles, rockets, and drones on energy infrastructure targets to freeze the residents. But now, with the warming of the weather, the residents of the region have escaped from the cold a little bit. In addition, Ukrainian forces took action again in this area to clear the Russians as the Kherson front lines started to heat up. Striking news came from the region. Residents of the Kherson region reported new explosions near the Antonovsky Bridge. Although the Antonovsky Bridge was destroyed and it was impossible to cross from here to the left bank, it was learned that there were violent explosions in the area. The exact number of explosions that occurred here was not specified, but the flames from the explosions were visible from a great distance. Photos of the attacks on the Antonovsky Bridge were shared on social media. In the photos, you can clearly see the moment of one of the explosions. However, it is not possible to determine exactly whether the attack was carried out on the bridge itself or on the left bank. This attack on the bridge was a heavy blow against the Russian aim of creating a connecting corridor in Kherson. On the other hand, there was silence for a long time in and around the Antonovsky Bridge. The reasons for the attacks that broke the silence are still being investigated. In addition, on the same day as these attacks, there was a serious activity in the region between Crimea and Kherson. Video footage of a powerful explosion appeared in the city of Armyansk on the border of the Kherson region and the Crimea. Residents of Crimea shared the video of the explosion near Armyansk on social media. In the presented video frames, you can see that the column of smoke from the explosion rises to a height of tens of meters, and some fragments are scattered to the sides. After this striking explosion, the sound of a second explosion was heard near the area. This time the explosion occurred on the border of the Kherson district. The fact that the Crimea and Kherson regions have been targeted so frequently in recent days has brought a critical question to mind: are the Ukrainian forces now taking drastic steps to retake Crimea? On this subject, various Russian politicians have been discussing a possible attack on Russian positions on the Key Peninsula for the past few days. In this regard, Viktor Bondarev stated that Ukraine has neither the resources nor the military potential to retake Crimea. Russian lawmaker Andrei Gurilyev stressed that it would be a very wrong move for Moscow to ignore the possibility of a NATO-backed attack on Ukraine. Also, Russian lawmaker Mikhail Skirman warned that if Ukrainian troops launch a major attack on Crimea, they will suffer a final crushing blow once the jewel of the Russian Empire, the strategically important Black Sea Peninsula, has a long history, including resistance to the Nazis in World War II and, more recently, annexation by Vladimir Putin in 2014. Currently, Crimea has literally turned into a firing line. On the other hand, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February, President Vladimir Zelensky was cautious at first when he began to publicly voice his ambitions for the Crimea region. But as the war continued and Russian troops gained more and more victories on the front lines, the Ukrainians' aim became clearer. Crimea is Ukraine, and its armed forces will take it back. In this regard, Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine Vladimir Kuralov stated that the Ukrainian forces could return to the Crimea in a short time, and the whole war with Russia would end by spring. Kuralov did not specify an exact date, but added that the recapture of Crimea was only a matter of time. In order for the Ukrainians to recapture Crimea, they must first completely clear the Kherson region and the areas where they can form an attack ramp over the Dnipro River from the Russians. Especially the Kherson region is very important in terms of regaining Crimea. Ukrainian leader Zelensky is also aware of this situation. That's why leader Zelensky recently announced that he visited Ukraine's southern region of Kherson, visiting areas affected by Russia's full-scale invasion and its months-long campaign to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Zelensky's arrival in Kherson was his second visit to the front line in 2 days. Zelensky reported that he also visited Pozid-Pokrovska, an agricultural village that was largely destroyed during the fighting in the city of Kherson, about 20 miles away. Zelensky's travels to regions partly occupied by Russia came as Western allies increased supplies of arms and ammunition to Ukraine, which was preparing for an anticipated counteroffensive that could include pressure to retake captured territory. On the other hand, the Ukrainian leader stressed the importance of taking control of Kherson and also talked about the activities of the Ukrainian forces in Crimea. In fact, we all know that it is important to establish an attack zone in the Kherson region because the Ukrainian armed forces can easily target Crimea over Kherson with long-range missile systems such as the GLSDB. Then the Ukrainians can completely blockade the peninsula by carrying out airstrikes against the Crimea with drones. It is very difficult for the Russians to respond in such a situation because although Russian air defense systems protect the Crimean Peninsula, Ukrainians have learned the location of Russian air defense systems thanks to the UAV attacks they have carried out on the peninsula. Ukrainian forces also know critical areas at Russian military bases in Crimea. In short, the only thing that the Ukrainians need is to create a solid attack area